Welcome to the modules for the Administration Code Regulation 703 KAR 5:080. My name is Devin Avery. I'm a program consultant in the Office of Assessment and Accountability. This training must be completed prior to administering any state required assessments. Each section of the larger training has been broken down into training modules. Please review all 5 modules for the complete administration code training. Module 3 will discuss administration practices, including scheduling, seating charts, and appropriate and active monitoring. There will be some allegation prevention and best practices tips and a check for understanding at the end of the module. Now let's take a look at appropriate administration practices. These are the roles of DACs or BACs. DACs or BACs shall schedule test administration, arrange for adequate staff to administer assessments, prepare accurate student testing rosters and seating charts, distribute correct testing materials to students as assigned, and ensure that all assessment materials are kept secure before, during, and after test sessions. Let's start with scheduling. Test sections shall be administered in the order in which they appear in the test administration manuals. For example, if a TAM presents an editing and mechanics assessment before an on-demand writing session, the students should test in that order. If a teacher gives the on-demand writing prior to the editing and mechanics, that would be an allegation. Students in the same grade in each school should be simultaneously tested in the same content area and test session. Please refer to the TAM for each specific assessment for makeup testing and other extenuating circumstances. Tests should be scheduled to avoid conflicts with lunch. However, if a lunch break is required during testing, test materials shall be secured and students shall be escorted to the lunchroom, told not to discuss the test, and sufficiently monitored to prevent discussion of test items during the entire lunch period before being escorted back to the testing area. A daily test schedule may be changed to provide accommodations as long as all students in the same grade in that building have completed that section by the end of the school day. This means that students with accommodations may not be tested on a different day from students without accommodations. They would all need to be tested on the same day. Students may not stay beyond their normal school hours to complete testing. Plan your schedule to be sure all students will complete their assessment by the end of the school day. Even if the daily schedule changes, the test must still be administered in order. Some assessments do provide for flexibility and schedule exceptions. This should be referred to KDE. Students may not work ahead to future test sections or return to past test sections once submitted. All state-required tests must have a seating chart. Seating charts can be for group testing, classroom layout, or individual testing, which we often see for accommodated or makeup testing. The chart may be kept in paper or electronic format and completed by the classroom teacher. A chart will be completed for each test session and kept on file. Some assessments provide a seating chart, or sometimes the DAC or BAC will supply the teacher or proctor with a locally created seating chart template, especially if your room arrangement is significantly different. Example templates created by KDE are available on the KDE website. Using the same seating chart for more than one test session is acceptable, especially if you are testing more than one section on the same day with the same students. All seating charts should contain a diagram of the room layout and location of teachers and students, even in small group or one-to-one test sessions. Seating charts should be completed prior to a test session and updated afterward to reflect the most accurate information. Again, you may scan these and save electronically. All seating charts should include the test name, district and school names, the test date, room number, content area being tested, all student names, names of all testing staff in the room, and the room layout. You may have to adjust this form for offsite testing to include a location, name, and address. If it is the student's home, you do not have to include the address. Student names should be placed in the appropriate places on the room layout. Indicate on the chart if a student is absent or if there is an empty seat. Using the same seating chart for more than one session is acceptable, again, especially if you are testing more than one section on the same day with the same students. If you have questions about a seating chart you or your school have created, check with your DAC. Active monitoring means staff walking up and down the aisles of the classroom, staying visible at all times, and ensuring that outside technology is not being used by students. It is the responsibility of principals and district administrators to ensure that proper monitoring occurs. Checking email, grading papers, lesson planning, etc., does not allow for active monitoring. Areas accommodating large numbers of students, such as arena testing in a gym or library, should have adequate staff to conduct active monitoring. In addition, a test administrator should not leave the testing environment during an active test session without being relieved by another trained member of staff. Students should never be left unattended during a test session or with secure materials. Students who exhibit disruptive behavior prior to or during testing may be tested in a different location from their peers. A plan to avoid a disruptive situation can be in place prior to testing. Interval or restroom breaks are at the discretion of the school or district and held between test sessions. Refreshment breaks are acceptable. However, materials must be collected, secured away from the student, and students should be sufficiently monitored during breaks and other unstructured activities to prevent discussion of test items. If students take a stretch break inside the classroom, materials need to be collected and secured. If testing online, the section must be submitted. If the materials are collected and secured, there is less chance of a possible violation of test security. If an individual student needs a restroom break during a test session, they must be monitored. If the school or district has approved interval or restroom breaks, the length of time, refreshments served, and monitoring of students must not affect testing integrity in any way. It is advised to schedule tests to avoid conflicts with lunch. However, if a lunch break is required during testing, lunch shall be brought to the students in the testing area. Suppose there are too many students for this to be reasonably accomplished. In that case, test materials shall be secured and students should be escorted to the lunchroom, told not to discuss the test, sufficiently monitored to prevent discussion of test items during the entire lunch period, and then escorted back to the testing area. Test administrators must be careful not to influence or take ownership of a student's responses. This may require suspending some actions that are routinely done during instruction. It is acceptable to advise all students before testing begins and at the 5-minute warning to do such things as double check their work or look for items that they may have forgotten to answer and submit properly when they are finished. Test administrators should ensure that students are logged into the appropriate test, which could include making sure the student has received the correct test ticket, or for paper tests, making sure they're in the appropriate area of the test book and student response book at the beginning of each session. As part of monitoring, test administrators should ensure that students do not get off track in their work. While doing this, they may not specifically direct individual students to go back to skipped or omitted items. It is not acceptable to encourage students to edit any responses by providing an evaluation of their work through tone, gesture, or phrase such as, "You can do better," or "You can write more." Coaching, editing, and pointing out errors or missing answers in the student's work or any test item to improve student scores is unacceptable. No one at any time is to alter student answers. Doing so can lead to sanctions by the Education Professional Standards Board, EPSB. Changing student answers doesn't solely mean physically altering, but also means such things as leading, coaching, or giving answers. Some allegation prevention tips regarding monitoring include not leaving students physically unattended during testing, even for a few moments. Leaving students unattended also includes inattention due to preoccupation with other tasks. Best practice also includes having a plan in place to monitor hallways or providing escorts for student breaks. It's time for our third check for understanding. Again, we will read through these yes or no questions and then discuss the answers. Question 1. Is it acceptable to change the order of the test to facilitate calculators or other accommodations? No, it is not acceptable to change the order of the test. The schedule may change, but the test must be given in the order it appears in the TAM. Question 2. Is it acceptable for a disruptive student to be tested away from their peers, even if that student does not have a plan? Yes, students who exhibit disruptive behavior prior to or during testing may be tested in a different location from their peers. This plan to avoid disruptive situations can be in place prior to testing. This is a local decision, and documentation may be kept at your district level. Question 3. Is it acceptable for students to take an unscheduled break during an active test session without a monitor? No, students may not take unmonitored breaks during active test sessions. Question 4. Is it acceptable to give evaluative feedback during testing, such as try to write a little more or are you sure that's all? The answer is no. While phrases such as do your best, get started, and stay on task are acceptable, any comments that could be construed as evaluative or coaching are not acceptable. This concludes Module 3. Please proceed through all 5 modules for the complete training. If you have any questions, please contact us at dacinfo@education.ky.gov or by calling 502-564-4394.